to make a complete human being.
Are you not perhaps afraid of what might happen to you as a result of making these revelations?
Oh yes, I probably am a dead man already.
What do you mean?
When you understand the makeup of the Muslim movement and the psychology of the Muslim movement, as long as if I myself, by having confidence in the leader of the Muslim movement, if someone came to me and I had no knowledge whatsoever of what had taken place and they told me what I'm saying, I would kill them myself. The only thing that would prevent me from killing someone who made a statement like this, they would have to be able to let me know that it's true. Now, if anyone had come to me other than Mr. Muhammad's son, I never would have believed it, even enough to look into it. But I had been around him so closely, I had seen indications of the reality of it, but my religious sincerity made me block it out of my mind.
Have you received threats on your life?
Oh, yes. I first received threats on my life in December. In December. No, not in December, in January. When it first became known that I had come back to New York and told the captain of the fruit in New York, who was my right-hand man formerly, and also the secretary of the New York Mosque and the minister in Boston. When it became known that I had told them, then an effort was made to shut me up. One brother encouraged to go out to my house and shut me up. And fortunately, it was a brother who was well capable of doing so, but it was a brother who was highly intelligent. He was academically equipped to think for himself. And what he was told to do didn't add up. And fortunately, he was the one who put out a feeler to me to find out what was wrong. And I opened his eyes. And then he opened the eyes of the same crew whose job it is to do this kind of work.
You mean he was going to kill you?
Oh, yeah.
We all know about the assassination attempt that went public when his house was firebombed. That night when Malcolm said if something would have happened to one of his daughters, he would have grabbed his rifle and went after the first person in sight. But many other attempts never made public. Malcolm's cousin, Hakeem Jamal, in his book called From a Dead Level, he speaks about a situation in Los Angeles. Malcolm flew out to LA to meet with some of the women that were allegedly impregnated by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. See, Malcolm only told some of his closest people about the trip. And he also used a fake name, David, to book the flight. Now, either someone close to Malcolm gave him up, or the FBI got the information from bugging his phone. Then they had to tip off the N.O.I. because the nation was at the airport waiting on him. Over 20 detectives had to quickly hide Malcolm in a secret room. Then the detectives boarded the plane with Malcolm and flew to Chicago. Once they arrived in Chicago, for Malcolm's safety, they had to hold him for over 24 hours. When they released Malcolm, members of the N.O.I. tried to attack Malcolm and the police. In a book called The Judas Factor, written by Carl Evans, he speaks on another attempt on Malcolm's life. On July 4th, 1964, Malcolm stepped outside of his home to move his car closer to the house. As soon as he stepped on the sidewalk, 4 members of the N.O.I. chased Malcolm, armed with knives, all the way to his car. Malcolm made it to his car and hurried up and locked the doors, and then he sped off. Another attempt was made on Malcolm's life in April of 1964. When Malcolm made his pilgrimage to Mecca, Malcolm said there were 2 white men following him around all day. Malcolm ended up getting poisoned, and after he received treatment at the emergency room, the doctors definitely said that it was intentional. The FBI wanted Malcolm dead. The CIA wanted Malcolm dead. The Nation of Islam wanted Malcolm dead. The FBI wanted him dead because they kept trying to squeeze information out of Malcolm, and Malcolm wouldn't give it to him. They also wanted him dead because J. Edgar Hoover said he wanted to prevent a black messiah from rising. There's a recording of the FBI telling Malcolm that they could make him disappear. The CIA wanted Malcolm dead because Malcolm was meeting with 33 African nations to take the treatment of Negroes to the United Nations. Malcolm also was meeting with President Lyndon B. Johnson and fighting for reparations. And of course, the Nation of Islam wanted him dead. But there's so many reasons surrounding that, it'll make your head spin trying to figure that one out. Days before Malcolm's assassination, the Nation of Islam was written out the Audubon Ballroom. And according to Dick Gregory, the CIA was also written out the Audubon Ballroom. In Dick Gregory's book, Defining Moments in Black History, Read Between the Lies, Dick Gregory speaks about a conversation. On February 21st, 1965, Malcolm called Dick Gregory and asked him was he coming. Dick Gregory said, "Malcolm, I love you, but I don't want to take the chance because I think the government is about to kill you." Malcolm said, "What do you mean?" Dick Gregory said, "Well, I closed tonight at Basin Street East, but I had my wife book me a flight into Chicago, and I'm going to stay there until they tell me you're dead, because the government won't get 2 for the price of 1. And I'm also calling Adam Clayton Powell, and I'm begging him not to come either." A man named Pio Gamma Pinto is the one who changed Malcolm's views from black nationalism to Pan-Africanism. And 4 days after Malcolm's assassination, Pio was gunned down. Now we all know the story of smoke bombs going off, someone yelling, "Get your hand out of my pocket," a man with a shotgun rushing the stage, and 2 men with handguns. But according to Dick Gregory, someone also was positioned above Malcolm, shooting down into him at a downward angle, because Malcolm's autopsy shows bullet wounds from a different angle. The members of the assassination team was Linwood X, Wilbur McKinley, he was the one that yelled, "Get your hand out of my pocket," and threw the smoke bomb. Leon Davis, he was one of the men with the handguns. Thomas Hager, he was the other man with the handgun. And William Bradley, aka Mustafa Shabazz, was the man with the sawed-off shotgun. This was the plan. The 2 without weapons, Linwood X and Wilbur McKinley, was to try to enter the ballroom first to see if somebody was going to frisk them. If the 2 were to be frisked, the other 3 would have turned around and left. So Malcolm was almost killed in Detroit, was almost killed in Chicago, was almost killed in Los Angeles, was almost killed when he went to Africa, and he was almost killed at his house more than once. And nobody thought to frisk people at the door for weapons? A man named Clarence X. Gill, who was the bodyguard for heavyweight champ Muhammad Ali. Gill and other members of the Nation of Islam beat a man named Leon X. Amir for over 20 minutes. Leon X. Amir was a high-ranking member of the N.O.I. and a strong follower of Malcolm X. Clarence X. Gill was known as an enforcer for the Nation of Islam. A year later, after the beatdown of Leon X. Amir, on March 12, 1965, Leon X. Amir was murdered. This was one day after he met with the FBI to provide information on Malcolm's assassination. Before Malcolm's death, in a book called The Reassassination of Malcolm X, Malcolm was speaking to people close to him, including Alex Haley. It got to a point where Malcolm just wanted to die. Malcolm said he was a marked man and said he had died within 5 days. Even at the Audubon Ballroom at his death, witnesses said when the men rushed the stage, Malcolm stared at him with his chest out. Malcolm stared at him and dared him to shoot him. Malcolm felt like if he died, he'd be saving his family. House being firebombed, people threatening his family, people watching his family. It got to a point Malcolm wanted to sacrifice his life for his family. The only man that was arrested for the murder was Thomas Hagen. Thomas Hagen did 44 years in prison, and this is him today. There were 2 other men arrested, but they were wrongfully convicted. Norman X. Butler and Thomas X. Johnson. The 2 men who formed the assassination team were never arrested. The National Secretary of the Nation of Islam, John Ali, and Clarence X. Gill did the recruiting, and they formed the team. Still to this day, there's only been speculation. No one knows who truly killed Malcolm. I read 14 books, and I watched well over 30 hours of different interviews, speeches, listened to Malcolm talk, listened to his enemies and other members of the N.O.I. I've also Googled just about anything that you can Google, and I don't have a clue. But I think it's safe to say the FBI, the CIA, and the Nation of Islam all worked together to kill Malcolm.
Become the leader of this kind of a group.
Which kind of a group?
A violent group.
It's not a case of becoming a leader of a violent group. I don't think any group, even that's ready, wants violence. It's a case of...
Is this not, Minister Malcolm, a call to action of sorts that you are raising here and now?
I don't have to raise a call to action. And this is what I'm trying to make white people see. They have lost their ability to be objective where the race problem is concerned, primarily because they know that no real meaningful results have come from the Negro struggle. And in defense of this, they always call it or label it violence.
You really believe that any meaningful result is going to come from violence?
It's not a case of violence. I think that, see, if you could get away from looking at it as violence, then you would be objective and see that actually all it is a tendency to react to what they are confronting. White people don't realize how frustrated Negroes have become.
I think they have come to understand the Negro's frustration, but they are also of the opinion that no good can possibly come from violence.
If they are of that opinion, Mike, if you think that the powder keg that's in your house is going to explode under certain conditions, either you have to remove the powder keg or remove the conditions. You can't stand there and label the powder keg as an enemy when you have the ability or have it within your power to change the condition, and it won't explode.
Do you know of any contingency plan for action?
No. I know of none. But I don't think if you go and study the history of oppressed people, I know of none. But I don't think if you go and study the history of oppressed people, usually their initial action is not a plan. Usually it's a reaction, and it's on the part of a few, and then everybody gets right on in with it. And I think you'll find that if Negroes ever have to resort to any kind of physical action to defend themselves, many white people will be on the side of Negroes. Many white people are fed up with what the Negroes suffer. And this is what I had to become aware of on my pilgrimage to Mecca. I could see then that there are many white people in this country who will side with the Negro in whatever he has to do to protect himself.
You have changed your attitude about the white man in the United States to some extent.
Well, I've broadened my scope. Travel broadens your scope. It gives you a wider understanding. And I have, in my many lectures on college campuses, seen many whites, even as a black Muslim, whose reaction to much of what I had to say showed me that they were genuinely concerned. Some weren't genuinely concerned, but many of them were. And this element is increasing.
But that's a considerable change of opinion in Malcolm X.
No, today I'm speaking for myself. Formerly I spoke for Elijah Muhammad. And everything I said was, Elijah Muhammad teaches us thus and so. I'm speaking now from what I think, from what I have seen, from what I have analyzed, and the conclusions that I have reached.
Then the white man is no longer the devil, and he is no longer bound to be evil.
The Holy Quran teaches us to judge a man by his conscious behavior, by his intention. And my reason for going to Mecca was to get a better understanding of the religion of Islam and what the Quran teaches. So I judge a man by his conscious behavior. I am not a racist. I don't subscribe to any of the tenets of racism.
Then there are good whites and good blacks and bad whites and blacks.
It's not a case of being good and bad, good or bad blacks and whites. It's a case of being good or bad human beings.